Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Preston here, and this is my post-fight reaction for, and I'm gonna finish all my post-fight reactions today, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But this is my post-fight reaction to Bam Bam stopping, or I think it actually was a knockout. Actually, it was a knockout. Like to Bam Bam knocking out Fernando Martinez in, I don't know what round it was. I think it was like round like 8 or something, and shit like that. But he knocked him out though, and stuff like that. And bro, Bam Bam looked impressive, dude. Like I am just saying, man. Like seriously, like that boy Bam Bam, like man, dude, like he looked like really impressive, man. And stuff like that. You know what I mean? And that's the thing and shit like that. You know what I mean? And I gotta give my hat off to him, bro. And shit like that. You know what I mean? And that's the thing and shit. It's just this dude keeps on proving why he's the best, in his division, and stuff like that. Like honestly, I feel like he's a little too good for that division now, where it's just like he might need to think of going up in weight, and shit like that, because I just don't think there's anybody that's gonna be able to handle the power, of Bam Bam. It's just he has too much power for that weight class, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like just that dude he got way too much power for that weight class, and shit like that. You know what I mean? And that's the thing, and shit like that. And there were talks about like after this fight, stuff like that, a potential fight could be where he could go up in weight to fight Naoya anyway. Like, I don't really think, like, I mean, a part of me thinks it's too soon, but a part of me thinks that he's ready for that type of fight. Because it just more of like, they both have a packed resume. They both have belts, and stuff like that, lots of belts, and they both are prize fighters, where it's just like, you don't really know if, like, it could really go either way realistically, and shit like that, you know what I mean? And I'm just saying, and that's a super fight. Like, honestly, I don't really think there would be any fight ever in ever, that would be a bigger fight than that between Inoue and Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like there wouldn't be, there's not going to be a bigger fight than that. You know what I mean? And I feel like that weight class needs that kind of fight. Even though I just don't know how it would be, where it would be like pay-per-view or not, and shit like that. Because I don't know if Turkey would make the fight free, or, or if the fight would just, or if, Oscar De La Hoya would promote the fight, but I just don't think Oscar would be promoting that fight, though, and shit like that. You know what I mean? Because it's just like he's gonna try to be biased, towards Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, because Bam Bam is one of his fighters that's like making Golden Boy survive and shit like that. You know what I mean? Or is he even on Golden Boy, or is he a Matchroom or some shit? I don't even fucking know, and shit like that. You know what I mean? But it's just more of like, I'm just saying though and shit like that, you know what I mean? But I would have minded that fight with pay-per-view though, between Bam Bam and Naoya Inoue. But let's talk more into this fight though, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Let's talk more into this fight, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And basically, like, in this fight and shit like that, you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing and shit, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like, like in this fight and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like, at first, Fernando was doing his thing at first and stuff like that, and stuff like that, even though, like, he wasn't necessarily winning the rounds, because I just feel like the single punches of Bam Bam was doing enough to winning those rounds, but he was still giving, was still like, making Bam Bam have to think, and having to, like, do like more angles and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And like, like you could tell that he was getting like a little bit of anxiety at first, or basically just he had to like more try to figure out Fernando, and stuff like that, but after like, like 3 rounds, it was over, bro, and shit like that, because all of the fight, it was all Bam Bam. There wasn't a single round I gave to Fernando Martinez. But I'm just saying, like, early in that fight, like, I mean, like, it's just more of like he was competitive, but it's just more of like once the later rounds hit, it's just more of like, it just, that's where it just like, it just was no more, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And it just like, and obviously with what happened with the stoppage, or I mean of a knockout, it was a matter of time until Bam Bam was gonna knock out Fernando Martinez, and stuff like that, because Fernando is a very tough fighter, and I still think he's a very tough fighter, and I still think he's one of the best flyweights of all time, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like, like I'm just saying and shit, because he has the resume to proving it, he has the record to proving it, I mean, there is Ray Boom Boom Mancini and stuff like that, and stuff, but like, I think he was like, what, like bantamweight or some shit, and stuff, but it's just more of like, this generation of fighters is definitely very different, like when it comes down to the flyweight division. Like the flyweight division nowadays would like Fernando Martinez would beat Ray Boom Boom Mancini in his prime. I mean, it would be a good fight, but I feel like it would just be a matter of time until Boom Boom's getting kind of hit a little too much, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And that's the thing and shit. But you never really know though, but I'm just saying I would slightly favor if it was like a like a Mr. Peabody and Sherman type of fight, and shit like that, you know what I mean? Where it just like go to the future and like where Fernando just goes back to the future and shit like that, back to Ray Boo Boo Mancini's time and shit like that, you know what I mean? Like, I would favor, Fernando, just by a little bit, though. It could honestly be a draw, and shit like that, to be honest with you, but I would slightly favor, Julio, I would slightly favor Fernando Martinez. But I don't know, though, and shit like that, But I'm just saying, like, that's how good of a fighter Fernando Martinez is. He's actually a very, very, very good fighter, and shit like that, you know what I mean? And that's the thing and shit, it's like, it's just his, like when it comes down to volume punching and shit like that, you know what I mean? I mean, obviously, I feel like who has the quicker volume punching between Bam Bam and Fernando Martinez. I mean, Fernando proved that he had more of the better, who had more of the better, who had more of the quicker hands. That was it. He wasn't the better fighter. He didn't have better footwork. He didn't have more power, and stuff like that, Like, he was mainly quicker, but he just didn't know how to use it. Because he was getting hit so much by those punches by Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Because that's what Fernando Martinez is known for, is being very quick with his punches, and stuff like that, very, very quick with his punches, like those at different angles, awkward angles, and stuff like that, can fight you at random distance, and shit like that, like, that's the thing and shit, but he fought against a real technical artist of Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, where it's just more of like, he couldn't do all that, for that long and shit, because then Bam Bam knew exactly what he needed to do to neutralize him, and shit like that, and cut the distance and shit like that, and just basically just made it his own fight, even in distance, and shit like that. I mean, like, Fernando wasn't really able to really do much at distance, and shit like that, you know what I mean? And that's the thing and shit, and stuff like that, it's just like, but yeah, and stuff like that, But that punch though was brutal. Was a nice punch though, and shit like that. I think because it was a punch like, to the chin and stuff. Like, yeah, it was a punch to the chin. It was like directly on the chin too, and stuff like that. And it's just like, like he was shook from that. And like when I seen how he was just like really just like boneless on the ground and shit, I was like, damn, like this fight is over, and shit like that. Because he knocked out Fernando Martinez, bro, and shit like that. Like, if you guys didn't see the replay of the fight, I'm pretty sure you guys did, and shit like that, you know what I mean? But I'm just saying, he got KO'd, bro, like, literally, like, man, I wish I could show you the replay, but YouTube would copyright my shit and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So, yeah, so I can't really do that, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But yeah, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But yeah, man, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Very good win, and stuff like that, for Bam Bam Rodriguez, you know what I mean? But I'm just saying and shit, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like, but in a way, and stuff like that, like, either way, I mean, like, there's other fights out there and stuff like that, you know what I mean, that he can fight, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And that's the thing and shit like that, you know what I mean? Like, there's other fights out there that he can fight and stuff like that, and, and that's the thing and shit, and stuff like that, but it's just more of like, in a way, like, it's just, he keeps running through everybody, Bam Bam. It's just like, if he keeps on doing that, and if he goes up in weight and other fighters, he keeps on doing that too. Like, evidently, he got to fight in a way, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But we'll see, though, and shit like that, because I don't want to jinx nothing, because, I mean, I really do want to see that fight and shit like that, you know what I mean? Either way, I mean, it's definitely a risk for reward fight, more definitely for Bam Bam, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But I'm just saying, dude, it's just like, it's a well worth fight to watch, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And that's the thing, and stuff like that, because it's just more of like, who else is in that division that can be able to handle Bam Bam, you know what I mean? It's just, he keeps on beating everybody. Like, that Fubalili Kafu, dude, was like one of the last people that was able to be able to handle, or be able to do anything against, Bam Bam. He got stopped. Now that, Bam Bam faced Fernando Martinez, he stopped Fernando Martinez. Like, it's just like he's making this easy work. Like, really easy work. Like, I'm just saying and shit. It's almost like, it's just like, it feels like he's going into these fights with so much confidence that, like, it's just like, like, I feel like, he doesn't, like, doesn't really have to think all the time and shit. Like, it's just, he's so used to doing the regular things of what he does, and shit like that, and he's confident in what he does, where it's just like, where it's just like, he just knocks these niggas out like they're nothing, bro, and shit like that. Like, I'm just saying, bro, and shit like that, but yeah, man, and shit like that, you know what I mean? But that's what I got for y'all and shit like that, for this fight and shit, you know what I mean? Again, really good performance, really good performance from Bam Bam Rodriguez, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And I'm just saying, like there's, in a way, there's so many other fights, and stuff like that, but I'm definitely curious to see, of what's next for Bam Bam, because he didn't really take too much damage in that fight against Martinez, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So that's the thing and shit. But there is what's that dude's name? Julio Cesar Martinez, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But there is Julio Cesar Martinez, in the, I believe he's in the super flyweight division, so he's like a weight higher than Bam Bam, and stuff like that, but, I mean, honestly, I mean, that would be, I feel like he would definitely give a test to Bam Bam, but, he would get either outboxed, or he would get stopped by Bam Bam, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So I'm just saying, like, it's just like, either way, I mean, I would like to see that fight, though, and shit like that. I would like to see, like, media fights, but, I mean, I haven't seen Julio Cesar Martinez fight in a minute, though, and shit like that, like, I like his game, though, and shit like that, his power, and stuff like that, I wonder when he's gonna fight again, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But yeah, but I think he fights for PBC, though, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, and so, which is the right decision, I feel like, because that's what's going to get his name out there, and stuff like that, and that's what's going to give him tough fights, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But he hasn't fought in a minute, though. I haven't, like, literally, like, that boy hasn't fought in a minute, so I feel like if he's going to be fighting, Bam Bam, he got to get a little bit more active and shit like that, if he's going to be fighting Bam Bam, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying and stuff, but yeah, but then there's that, and then, of course, there's Naoya Inoue, and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And that's the thing and shit like that, you know what I mean? And if he wanted to go up to maybe, let's say to Neverete's weight class, I mean, that would even be a really good fight, though. But I feel like that would be a really big test, though, for Fernando, for Bam Bam, and stuff like that. Because the reason why is because, like, now that's significantly bigger than him and shit like that, and Neverente does very good against smaller fighters, you know, and shit like that, you know, like he has a resume to beating up on smaller fighters, you know, and shit like that, you know, and that's the thing and shit, you know, but I'm just saying, but you never really know and shit like that, you know what I mean? But yeah, you know, and shit like that, you know, but yeah, man, and shit like that, you know what I mean? But yeah, you know, and stuff like that, you know, but now that is it, you know, for me and stuff for this video. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'm Preston. Peace out, y'all.